We start our Kol Nidrei service on page 204. 204. Or zaru ala tzadik, o yishrei lev simcha. 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 B'shiva shel mahala, ובשיבה של מטה, על דעת המקום ועל דעת הקהל, אנו מתירים להתפלל עם הבריינים. בשיבה של מעלה, ובשיבה של מטה, על דעת המקום ועל דעת הקהל, אנו מתירים להתפלל עם הבריינים. בשיבה של מעלה, ובשיבה של מטה, על דעת המקום ועל דעת הקהל, אנו מתירים להתפלל עם הבריינים.
Kol Nidrei is an evening to consider promises. It's a time where we consider the promise of the year ahead, promises which we intend to keep, promises which we hope we can keep, and promises which we're not sure we can keep. I would say one of the most beautiful symbols in one of our Chevrei traditions is of having our Torahs come out of the ark during Kol Nidrei and be held by the families of people who are having their B'nai Mitzvahs in this coming year. This year, that is the family of Avram Weiss and the family of Sarah Glazer. Youth who are preparing to become B'nai Mitzvah, to become full participating members of the Jewish community, I think of that as part of the essence of the promise of the year ahead. And we're so sad that we can't all be together here in the sanctuary right now, seeing you guys holding those Torahs. Kol Nidrei is about looking at the promises of the year ahead, but it's also about looking at the promises of the year that's passed, especially the ones which we were not able to fulfill. This year, we need to remember that some of the vows we made were abrogated by circumstances beyond our control. What do we do with the Shiva visits we couldn't make or meals we couldn't share? In the ways we said we'd improve and grow before we could imagine what we've been through these past months. I wanted to share a poem written by Rabbi Hillary Chorney. All the vows I vowed last year have already been undone, unwritten. Promises I would have kept, swept like unbound pages of a manuscript, unfulfilled, scattered loosely about the quiet, untraveled streets. I planned, I swore, I committed to a blueprint of a year that has dissolved at my fingertips, and there is no following through. Master of the world, all I ask is for a chance to break promises, or better yet, keep them. May these next hours be ones of introspection, prayer, forgiveness of others where is appropriate, and forgiveness of ourselves. Gmar Chatima Tova.
Kol Nidrei Vesarei Vecharamei Vekonamei Vechinuyei Vekinusei Ushuot Dein Darna Udei Shtabana ולאחרים ודעשנה אנשיתנה מיום כיפורים זה עד יום כיפורים הבא עלינו לטובה כולהון יחרדנה בהון כולהון יהון שרן שביתים בטלים ומבוטלים לא שירים ולא קיימים נידרנה לא נדרי ואסרנה לא אסרי ושבועתנה לא שבועות
Kol Nidrei Vesarei Vecharamei Vekonamei Vechinuyei Vekinosei U'Shavuot Didarna Udeishtabana Udeacharimna Kippurim, זה עד יום כיפורים. הבא עלינו לטובה. כל חון ייחרתנה בחון. כל הון יהון שרן, שוויקין שביתין, ביתלין ומבוטלין, לשרירין ולקיימין. Nidrana la nidrei. Sarana ala esarei.
Kol Nidrei Vesarei Vacharamei Vekonamei Vechinuyei Vekinusei Yushvot. Nenadarana Udishtabana Udiacharimna Vidi Asarna Al Nafshatana Miyom Kippurim Hazeh Ad Yom Kippurim Abba Aleinu Letova. Kol Icharatna behon. Kol hon yehon sharan. Shevikin, Shevitin, Bitelin, Umvutalin, Lasheririn, Vela Kayamin. Nidrana Azarei Oshvuatana La Shabbat V'nislach lechol adat b'nei Yisrael v'lager agor b'tocham ki lechol ham b'ishkaga v'nislach lechol adat b'nei Yisrael v'lager agor b'tocham ki lechol ham b'ishkaga v'nislach lechol adat b'nei Yisrael v'lager agor b'tocham Ki lechol ha'am bishkaga, slachna la'avon ha'am hazeh, kegodel l'chazdecha, b'cha asher nasat l'am hazeh mimitzrayim v'yad heina, v'sham ne'emar, v'yomer Adonai, salachti kidvarecha, v'yomer Adonai, salachti kidvarecha, v'yomer Adonai, salachti kidvarecha. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, shehecheyanu v'kiyamanu v'higeyanu lazman hazeh. And we'll now have an address by Amit Golding, who is the chairperson, is that what we're calling him this week, of Chevrei Tzedek.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you, Odelia. Thank you, Jeanne. And thank you, Irwin, for a most inspiring beginning to Yom Kippur. And a special thank you to Jeanne for setting up the live streaming that we have been blessed with the ability to be together even from a distance throughout the high holidays. In the story, The Orchestra by Shai Agnon, the protagonist is faced with shame and loss when he is unable to prepare in time for the start of Rosh Hashanah. He has become overwhelmed with all of his responsibilities. He has become distracted and detained by trivialities. He arrives home just as the sun is setting and the Jewish New Year is upon him. I lifted my eyes and looked up at the sky. The sun was already about to set. I went home with a heavy heart. My daughter came out to meet me dressed in her holiday best. She pointed her finger into space and said, "Light." I thought to myself, what is she saying? The sun has already set and hasn't left a trace of light behind. Or perhaps she meant the candle that was kindled in honor of the festival. I looked at the candles and realized that the festival had already begun, and I had better run to the house of prayer. My daughter stared at my old clothes and put her little hands on her new dress to cover it, so as not to shame her father in his old garments. And her eyes were on the verge of tears, both for herself, who wore a new dress, when her father was dressed in old clothes, and for her father, who wore old clothes, at a time when the new year had arrived. In a more upbeat tale, some of you may recognize this from PJ Library, Chanale's Shabbat dress by Yitzchak Schweiger Dmiel. It is the daughter who is running late for the beginning of a holiday, the Sabbath, the Shabbat. She has put on her new beautiful Shabbat dress and gone out for a walk on Friday afternoon. As she starts back towards home, she sees an older man struggling to carry a sack of coal on his back. Without hesitation, Chanale helps hold up the bag of coal on the man's back to lessen his load. Afterwards, when she is about to head home, she realizes that she's running late for the beginning of Shabbat. She looks down at her beautiful new white dress and sees that it is full of black stains where she has helped to hold up the bag of black coal. There was a black spot here, another there, and another. Hannah's dress was covered with black stains from the charcoal maker's sack. The dress was ruined, and on the very first day she wore it. Hannah burst into tears. When twilight fell, Hannah was still sitting on a rock all alone in the field, sobbing bitterly. The moon looked down and whispered in a voice that only Hannah could hear, "What happened, child? Why are you crying?" Hannah could barely speak. She pointed to the black spots on her new dress. "Look, moon," she sobbed, "my Sabbath dress." The moon looked, and then he asked in a voice that only Hannah could hear, "Are you sorry that you helped the old man?" "Oh, no, I'm not sorry at all. But the dress, my white Shabbat dress, my mother." Then the moon glowed brightly and whispered, "Don't cry, child. Go home now and don't worry about your dress. All will be well." So Hannah started home, and as she walked along, the moon followed her. Moonbeams flooded down and touched the dress. Every black spot became a tiny bead of light. Soon Hannah's dress sparkled and glittered. It glowed like the purest silver. And on her way, she met her mother. "Who is this?" her mother asked. "It's Hannah, Mama. Don't you recognize me?" Hannah laughed as she ran into her mother's arms. As they walked home, Hannah told her mother everything that had happened. Then they went inside, and the whole room filled with light, the light of Hannah's Shabbat dress. In the end, Hannah's world is filled with the light of her kindness. Like the protagonist in Shai Agnon's story, who faced his limitations on the eve of Rosh Hashanah, we all face some degree of judgment on Yom Kippur. The judge may be our own conscience, reminding us that we have neglected ourselves or others in our community. Or it may be our perceived judgment by others, including our own shame in the face of the ones we love the most and are most afraid of letting down. The story ends on a note of despair, and we should acknowledge those individuals in our immediate community and in our broader community who have experienced profound loss this past year. A loss that has been compounded by our inability to provide comfort to our mourners in person. The protagonist in Shai Agnon's story is focused entirely on his own failings. I don't think it is healthy for us to dwell only on what we have done wrong. However, Yom Kippur is certainly an opportunity for each of us individually and for Chevrei Tzedek collectively to assess what we are doing well and what needs improvement. I'm sure that there are times in the last year when we have felt sadness, hopelessness, an overwhelming feeling of always running late. But these moments, I hope, have also been matched by moments of beauty and light, especially when we have been able to help and lift up another person and lighten their load, like Chanale with the old man and his sack of coal. I feel lifted up by all of you. You have all lightened my load. You have inspired me with your acts of generosity to this congregation, with your willingness to share your talents and wisdom and voices, and also your willingness to share your pain and your needs and your loss, and allowing others to hear you and support you, even if it is from afar. The story of Chanale and the Shabbat dress reminds us of the redemptive properties of helping others, and the incredible resilience of love. We should be buoyed by the feeling of accomplishment that comes from acts of tzedakah and a willingness to do hard work for the betterment of our community. Specifically for the sake of Chevrei Tzedek, Rabbi Katz has worked tirelessly to plan our services, especially Friday night and Havdalah services, and with the help of Irwin Weiss, all of our high holiday offerings. We are now at a moment that is a very special one-year anniversary for Rabbi Katz as our hired spiritual leader. If not for COVID, we would have celebrated a gala installment event for her this past spring, which hopefully we will someday be able to celebrate together in person. And we thank Rabbi Katz for her continued leadership and inspiration. I mentioned religious services, which have been planned and executed by our ritual committee, Dvar Torah coordinator, and Zoom hosts. Since the start of COVID, we have come together in the virtual sanctuary for more than 50 prayer gatherings. Our Chesed Mitzvah Committee has continued meeting, and we have arranged for 2 Shiva gatherings online. The Social Justice Committee has continued to meet as we hope to rededicate ourselves to Tikkun Olam. The Ad Hoc Bylaws Committee has met 14 times, and we hope to make improvements to our bylaws over the next year. Our Strategic Planning and Finance and Fundraising Committees have met multiple times, and this has included a commitment to quarterly checks and planning ahead to ensure our financial viability. This also included a highly successful Char Bar fundraising event. Our treasurers, Peter Evans and Randy Gertler, have continued to keep our books in order. Our youth committee has met multiple times and planned lovely events for graduation Shabbat, Rosh Hashanah, and upcoming for Sukkot. Our communications committee, and in particular Alyssa Hazor, has managed our website, including online signups for our in-person events. Our coordinating committee has met 8 times online, and our prior officers were even able to pull off a community meeting via Zoom, complete with breakout groups. Our membership committee has helped to reach out to members and has also used surveys to help gauge our interest in various formats for services, and will continue to come up with creative ways to reach out to potential new members. In order to make in-person events possible, the reopening committee has met numerous times and come out in force to ensure that in-person events go safely and smoothly. We have also had virtual meetings of our poetry group and our Parsha study group, and even a Sunday morning Parsha camp for families with young children. Despite, and perhaps even thanks to being forced online, the ECPC committee has planned numerous amazing limudim with both Chevrei members and outside guests, providing incredible talks on topics ranging from musical theory to Jewish names, to depictions of ancient antiquities through art, to Civil War history, to tzedakah, challah baking, Yiddish poetry, shofar blowing, and more. And who could forget the talk by Deborah Thompson about our double pay Sefer Torah? We have so much to celebrate, and all of it is thanks to the incredible efforts of individual Chevrei members and the work of our committees in coordination with Rabbi Katz. I have to give a special thanks to my co-officers, Jeanne Glazer, Vice Chair, and Doris Lefkowitz, Recording Secretary. Also, Liz Simon Higgs and Mike Field, our immediate past chair and vice chair, have continued to be incredibly supportive and helpful, and they've promised to provide a smooth transfer of power. Take note, Mr. President. A final thank you to all who have and will participate in leading services, giving Divrei Torah, blowing shofar, telling the Jonah story, producing the Yizkar Brook, and organizing our breakout study groups throughout the high holidays, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. In sum, the state of our Shul Chevrei Tzedek is tough and strong and resilient. It rests squarely on the shoulders of its rabbi and on its members who have borne the burdens of making this community run. I hope that those of you who have the time and strength to do so continue to help plan and execute all of our events, continue to do so in this year. I also urge those of you who perhaps have not given as much of your time and effort to Chevrei to step up in the coming year. Join a committee, bring your ideas and your energy to help keep Chevrei Tzedek vibrant and active. I wish all of you a fulfilling year, a safe year, and a meaningful fast. Shana Tova and Gmar Chatima Tova. Thank you.
We continue on page 207. 207. Baruch hu et Adonai hamevarach. Baruch Adonai hamevarach li'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai l'melech olam asher bidbaro mariyorim. Ma'avir yom u'mehevi laila u'mavnil ben yom u'ben laila Adonai tzavavot shemo el chai v'kayam tamid yimloch aleinu li'olam va'ed Baruch atah Adonai Amariv aravim 208 Ahavat olam beit Yisrael amcha habta Torah mitzvot chukim v'shvatim Ki hem chayenu v'yarech yameinu Elohem negeh yomam v'layla v'ahabatecha al tasir mimenu le'olamim Baruch atah Adonai Ohev amo Yisrael Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad Baruch Shem Kivod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed V'yavata after 8 Adonai Elohecha B'chol Levavcha V'chol Nafshecha V'yodecha V'yom V'yom Adonai Elohechem Emet. Bottom of 209. V'emunah kol zot v'kayam aleinu ki hu Adonai Eloheinu v'ein zolato v'nachnu Yisrael amo p'denim yad mo'avim. Ma'akev v'yevrotem v'choler v'tzvayim v'yitzchak amo Yisrael v'tochem v'teiret olam. Ma'avir b'anav v'em yisrael yam sev v'drutei U'malchuta b'ratzon kiblu aleihem Moshe Maryam uvnei Yisrael l'chanu shira b'simcha rabba v'yamru cholam mi chamocha ba'olim Adonai mi kamocha nedor b'kodesh Na'urotei lo tosefele Malchutcha ra'uvanecha Bokei hayam lifnei Moshe Ze'eli anu v'yamru Adonai yimloch li'olam va'ed V'ne'emar kifad Adonai et Yaakov U'ge'alo mi'ad chazak mimenu Baruch atah Adonai Goal Yisrael 212 Ki vayom hazeh yichaper alechem l'taher etchem mikol chatetechem lifnei Adonai titaru Chatzi Kaddish 212 Yitkada al yitkada shmei rabba bi'alama adivra kirutei v'yamlich malchutei b'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael b'agalav izman karev v'yimru amen yirei shmei rabba mevarach v'yalam olmei almaya yitbarach Yitbarach v'shtabach v'poar v'tramam v'yitnasei v'yitanar v'yitalev v'yitalal shemei dekudesha brichu leila leila mikol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata damiran me'alma ve'emeru amen. The silent Amida is on 213 through 221. Ose shalom bimromav. O yaseh shalom aleinu. V'al kol Yisrael. V'yimru, imru, amen. Yaseh shalom. Shalom aleinu. Ve'al kol Yisrael. V'imru, amen. We continue with our services on 223. Yale. Yale tachununeinu me'erev v'yavo shavateinu mi'boker v'yeirav rinuneinu ad arev Yale koleinu me'erev V'yavo tzidkateinu mi'boker v'yeira pidyoneinu ad arev Yale inuyenu me'erev v'yavo slichateinu mi'boker v'yeira nakateinu ad arev Yale menuseinu me'erev v'yavo lema'ano mi'boker v'yeiro kippureinu ad arev Yale yishenu me'erev v'yavo tahareinu mi'boker v'yeiro chinuneinu ad arev Yale zichroneinu me'erev v'yavo v'udeinu mi'boker v'yeiro hadrateinu ad arev Yale dafkeinu me'erev v'yavo gileinu mi'boker v'yeiro bakashateinu ad arev Yale etkateinu me'erev v'yavo elecha mi'boker v'yeiro eleinu ad arev. Page 225. Hanisham alach v'haguf palach chusa chusa al amalach Hanisham alach v'haguf palach chusa chusa al amalach Hanisham alach v'haguf shalach Adonai yaseh l'mahan shemecha Atanu al shemcha Adonai aseh l'mahan shemecha Bavor kevod shemcha Ki el chanun v'rachum shmecha L'man shemcha Adonai v'salachta lavoneinu ki ravu Darkecha Eloheinu l'ha'arich apecha La'ra'im v'latovim v'teilatecha L'mancha Eloheinu aseh v'lo lanu Rei amidateinu dalim bereikim. Tale aruchal alef nidaf, tinachem al afar va'efer. Tashlich chataenu v'tachon b'maasecha, tereki ein ish aseh imanu tzedaka. Middle of 226. Tavor al pesha b'timche asham, kiyam v'yatzei b'himosham, tazin shavatena v'takshiv menu ma'amar, kiyom v'yikra b'shem Adonai, v'yavor Adonai, al panav v'yikra, Adonai, Adonai, El Racham v'chanun, Erech apayim, v'rav chesed v'yamed, notzer chesed lo alofim, nosei avon v'pesha v'chata v'nakei, v'solachta lavoneinu, ulchatatenu unchaltanu. Slach lanu avinu ki chatanu, mechal lanu malkenu ki fashanu, ki ata Adonai tov v'salach, v'rav chesed l'chol korecha. 227. Ki hine kach omer b'yad hayotzer, b'irtzoto marchi b'irtzoto mikatzer, Kein manachnu biyadcha chesed notzer, la brita beit v'alte fen la yetzer, ki hine ka'even biyad hamsatet, b'irtzoto ochez b'irtzoto mechatet, kein manachnu biyadcha mechayeu memotet, La brita beit v'alte fen la yetzer, kine kakarzen b'yad hecharash, b'irtzoto dibek la'ur v'irtzoto peirash, kein anachnu b'yadcha tomech ani varash, la brita beit v'alte fen la yetzer, Kine kahege biyad hamalach, birtoto ochez uvirtoto shilach, kein anachnu biyadcha el to v'salach, la brita beit v'alte fen la yetzer, kine kazchuchit biyad hamsagig, Birtzoto chogeg, birtzoto mimogeg, kein anachnu biyadcha, mochel zadon b'sheged, la brita beit v'alte fen la yetzer, kine kairia biyad harokem, birtzoto miasher uvirtzoto me'akem, kein anachnu biyadcha, El kano v'nokem, la brita beit v'alte fen la yetzer, ki hine kakesef biyad hatzoref, birtzoto misagseg birtzoto mitzaref, kein anachnu biyadcha, mamtzi lamazor teref, la brita beit v'alte fen la yetzer, La brita beit v'alte fen la yetzer. Page 229. El melech yoshev al kisei rachamim, mitnaheg b'chasidut, mochel avanot amo, ma'avir rishon, marbe mechila l'chataim, uslicha lefoshim, oset stakot im kol basar varuach, v'lo chratam tigmol, el hareita lanu lo mahar shlosh esrei, zichar lanu ayam bereit shlosh esrei, כמו שהדת לענב מקדם, כמו שכתוב, וירד אדוני בענן, ויתייצב עמם, ויקרא בשם אדוני, ויעבור אדוני על פניו ויקרא. אדוני, אדוני, אל רחם וחנון, ערך אפיים, ורב חסד ואמת, נוצר חסד לא אלפים, נושא עוון ופשע וחטא ונקה, וסלחת לעווננו ולחטאתנו ונחלתנו. סלח לנו אבינו כי חטאנו, מחל לנו מלכנו כי פשענו, כי אתה אדוני טוב וסלח, ורב חסד לכל קוראיך. 232. אל מלך יושב על כיסא רחמים, מתנגד בחסידות, מוחל לבנות עמו, מעביר ראשון ראשון, מרבה מחילה לחטאים ולסליחה לפושעים, עושה צדקות עם כל בשר ורוח, ולא כרעתם תגמול. אל הרצה לנו למר 13, זכר לנו היום ברית 13, כמו שהודעת לנו מקדם, כמו שכתוב, וירד אדוני בענן, ויתייצב עמו שם, ויקרא בשם אדוני, ויעבור אדוני על פניו ויקרא. אדוני, אדוני, אל רחם וחנון, ערך אפיים, ורב חסד ואמת, נוצר חסד לאלפים, נושא עוון ופשע וחטא ונקה, וסלחת לעווננו ולחטאתנו ונחלתנו. סלח לנו אבינו כי חטאנו, מחל לנו מלכנו כי פשענו, כי אתה אדוני טוב וסלח, ורב חסד לכל קוראיך. Last 3 lines, 232. Slach na la'avon ha'am hazeh kegodel chazdecha, v'chasher nasata la'am hazeh mimitzrayim v'yad heina, v'sham ne'emar, v'yomer Adonai, salachti kidbarecha. 233. Kaper chatoenu bayom hazeh v'taharenu, kimo shekatuv, ki bayom hazeh yichaper aleichem, l'taher etchem mikol chatoteichem, lifnei Adonai titaru. Avienu el har kadshecha, v'samchenu bebeit tefilatecha, kimo shekatuv, ki beiti beit tefila, Yikarei lechol ha'amim. Shema Koleinu Adonai Eloheinu Chus v'rachem aleinu Chus v'rachem aleinu v'kabel berachamim uvratzon et tefilateinu. Hashivenu Adonai Elecha ונשוב ונשוב חדש ימינו חדש ימינו חדש ימינו חדש ימינו כקדם. אל תשליכנו מלפניך, ברוח קודשך אל תיקח ממנו. אל תשליכנו לעת זקנה, ככלות כוחנו, אל תעזבנו. אל תעזבנו אדוני אלוהינו, אל תרחק ממנו, עשה עמנו לטובה. Eloheinu v'Elokei Avotenu, al tazveinu v'al tichenu, v'al tachlimenu v'al tafer britcha itanu, karvenu l'toratecha, lamdenu mitzvotecha, reinu dirachecha, hat libenu liyirat shmecha, umalet levavenu li'avatecha, v'nashuv elecha be'emet uv'lev shalem, u'lman shimcha gadol timchal, v'tislach lavonenu, kakatu b'divrei kadshecha, l'man shimcha Adonai, v'salachta lavoni ki rabu. 234. Going down to the vidui in the middle. Anu azevanim v'yatarachum v'chanun, anu ksheyareh v'yatarech apayim, anu malei avon v'yatamolei rachamim, anu yameinu gitzel over, v'yatahu shnotecha lo yitamu, Eloheinu v'Elokei Avotenu, tavu levanecha tfilatenu, v'al titalam mitchinatenu, she'ein anachnu azefanim, ukshe'aref lamar levanecha, Adonai Eloheinu v'Elokei Avotenu, tzadikim anachnu v'lo chatanu, avo anachnu v'avotenu, chatanu. 235. Ay, 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 Ashamnu, Bagadnu, Gazalnu, Dibarnu, Dofi. Ay, 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 He'avinu, V'hirshanu, Zadnu, Chamasnu, Tafalnu, Sheker. Ay, 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 Yatsnera, Kizabnu, Latsnu, Maradnu, Niatsu, Sararnu, Avinu, Pashanu, Sararnu, Kishinu, Oref. Ay, 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 Rashanu, Shichatnu, Tiabnu, Ta'inu, Titanu, Sarnu mitzvatecha, Umimishpatecha hatovim v'lo shavalanu mi'ata tzadik al kol haba aleinu כי אמת עשית ואנחנו הרשענו. Page 236, the paragraph with the Dalet. You have always been known as the one who overlooks transgression. Hear our cry as we stand before you in prayer. Overlook the transgressions of a people turning from transgression. Wipe away our transgressions from your sight. 237. Al chet shechadanu levanecha be'ones uvratzon, v'al chet shechadanu levanecha be'imut salev, al chet shechadanu levanecha bivli da'at, v'al chet shechadanu levanecha bevitui sfatayim, al chet shechadanu levanecha. Halachet shechatanu lefanecha beyetzer hara, v'halachet shechatanu lefanecha b'yodim uvlo yodim, v'al kulam Eloas lichad, slach lanu, mechal lanu, kaper lanu, al chet shechadanu levanecha b'chachash uv'chazav, v'al chet shechadanu levanecha b'chapat shelchad, al chet shechadanu levanecha b'latzon, v'al chet shechadanu levanecha b'lashon haram. Halachet shechatanu lefanecha b'nayim rahamot, v'halachet shechatanu lefanecha b'azut meitzach, v'al kulam Eloas lichad, slach lanu, mechal lanu, kaper lanu, al chet shechadanu levanecha bifrikat ol, v'al chet shechadanu levanecha biflilut, al chet shechadanu levanecha bitzdiat rea, v'al chet shechadanu levanecha bitzarut ayin. Al chet shechadanu levanecha b'kol Halachet shechatanu lefanecha bitzumat yad, v'halachet shechatanu lefanecha b'timan levav, v'al kulam Elohas lichad, slach lanu, mechal lanu, kaper lanu. Avinu Malkeinu is on 243, 243. Avinu Malkeinu chatanu levanecha, Avinu Malkeinu ein lanu melech ela ata. Avinu Malkeinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Hachazirenu b'tshuva shlema lefanecha. Avinu Malkeinu, Shlach refuah shlema lecholei amecha. Avinu Malkeinu, Zachrenu b'zikaron tov lefanecha. Avinu Malkeinu Katvenu B'Sefer Chayim Tovim. Avinu Malkeinu Katvenu B'Sefer Geula V'Yeshua. Avinu Malkeinu Katvenu B'Sefer Parnasa V'Chalkala. Avinu Malkeinu Katvenu B'Sefer Zichuyot. Avinu Malkeinu Katvenu B'Sefer Slicha Umechila. Avinu Malkeinu Atzmak Lanu Yeshua B'Kar Avinu Malkeinu Ren Keri Shema Lecha Avinu Malkeinu Hara Keri Shechecha Avinu Malkeinu Shmak Lecha Avinu Malkeinu Avinu Malkeinu Aseh Lemancha Im Lo Lemanenu. Avinu Malkeinu Chaneinu Vaneinu. Avinu Malkeinu Chaneinu Vaneinu Ki Ein Banu Maasim. Aseh Yemanu Tzedaka V'Chesed. Aseh Yemanu Tzedaka V'Chesed V'Hoshi'enu. Kaddish Shalem 245. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabba amen v'yalema dirakirute v'yamelech malechute v'chayechon v'yamechon v'chaye dechol beit Yisrael b'hagala v'zman karib v'yemeru v'yemeru amen Yehi Shmei Rabba Mevarach Le'alam Olalmei Almaya Olalmei Almaya Yitbarach V'yishtabach V'yitpoar V'yitramam V'yitnaseh V'yittadar V'yittale V'yittalal Shemei Dekudesha Shemei Dekudesha Berichu Le'ela Le'ela Mikol Birchata V'shirata Tushbechata V'nechemata Damiran B'yalma V'yimru Amen Titkabel Tzalotan V'atan Dechol Yisrael Kadem Avuham Devishmaya V'yemeru Amen Yesh Lamarabba Min Shemaya V'chayim Aleinu V'chayim Aleinu V'yakal Yisrael V'yemeru Amen Oseh Shalom Bimroma Hu Yaseh Shalom Aleinu Aleinu Ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol Yoshvei Tel ve'yemeru, ve'yemeru, amen.
You will be shocked to hear that I am not a ballerina. I have not taken a ballet class. I know. I have not taken a ballet class in a very long time. but there's one concept that has stuck with me from my days at the Swarthmore Ballet Theater and the Broadway-bound Dance Academy in Media, Pennsylvania, which is this one specific idea, the idea of spotting. Spotting is a technique used in dancing where during a spin or a turn, the dancer keeps their eyes focused and their eyes and head focused on a single point as long as possible. And then when absolutely necessary, they turn their head quickly around so they can refocus on that single spot while the rest of their body turns at a more even pace. Not above demonstrating what I'm talking about. So here we go. Something like that. Spotting helps the dancer to maintain their balance and their control and to minimize dizziness. And actually, I recently learned that video games, first-person perspective video games, use a similar principle in their design, where they leave things for the person who's playing to focus on in their line of sight, even as they're turning very quickly, so as to prevent the person who's playing the game from getting motion sick. In the book of Jonah, we face characters dealing with yet another kind of nausea, which is seasickness. We meet a ship of sailors who pick up a passenger at a port in Jaffa, just south of Tel Aviv. Unbeknownst to them, this random passenger is the runaway prophet Jonah. Soon, the story goes, God cast a mighty wind upon the sea, and a great storm came upon the sea, and the ship nearly broke. Now, storms are usually the result of a bunch of different factors. Scientifically, they emerge when a center of atmospheric low pressure develops with a high pressure surrounding it. I can't get into all the details about this because in addition to not being a ballerina, I'm also not a scientist. But take, for example, the expression, a perfect storm, refers to a combination of adverse factors causing the potential for a stressful or difficult situation. For example, incoming flu season during a pandemic under a national government that is not adequately responding to the situation could be considered a perfect storm. By comparison to the perfect storm that we're dealing with, the sailors who left Jaffa with the stowaway prophet faced a much simpler storm. Their storm was caused by only one person. That one person was Jonah. It took them a little time to figure it out. Before they figured out that it was Jonah, everyone on the ship was in panic. The ship was nearly breaking apart, and they were throwing things overboard. As soon as they threw Jonah overboard, well, so, you know, I assume you guys know the story. You've been to Yom Kippur before. Eventually, they figure out that it's Jonah, and they throw him overboard, and the sea stops its raging. V'ya'amod hayam nizapo. Such a wonderful picture, a wonderful fantasy to imagine that one storm could be totally dissolved by one person. I think about this when I listen to some of the ways that people react to Donald Trump, as if he's the only person to blame for the horrible situation our country is in. Not to excuse his behavior, but there's many things that have happened over the past 4 years. Violence against immigrants, violence against the environment, violence against people of color, violence against LGBTQ people. It's a lovely fantasy, I think, to imagine that all these problems will suddenly go away if Donald Trump stopped being our president. But I would argue we can't think about our president the way the sailors treated Jonah. Racism, anti-Semitism, white supremacy, a culture of valuing money and profit over the well-being of actual people. All of these societal problems existed long before the current presidency. There are so many factors that led to his being in the position he's in now. And there are so many choices made by individuals every day that keep him in power, that keep him able to make atrocious decisions. So there is no one person that we can simply throw off our ship to restore things back to order. We are in the middle of a storm, and we will be for a while. So the question is, what do we do? Jonah himself gives us one answer. We can close our eyes and go to sleep. That's what he does when the storm happens. He goes down to the bottom of the ship. He falls totally asleep. And the captain has to come and wakes him up and says, Malachan, you're done. What? You're sleeping at a time like this? I like sleeping as much as the next person, but I think we can agree that this is not a good solution, because the solution involves blocking out the world entirely, involves blocking out the needs of the entire ship, and doesn't actually solve the problem of the storm. Jonah just removes his own fate from the fate of everyone around him, and he ignores his own fate. I would argue that instead of either fantasizing that we can kick one person off of the ship and hope that the storm goes away, or instead of going to sleep the way Jonah does, we need instead the skills to deal with the turmoil of a storm. What we need to do is cultivate practices that help us maintain our bearings through dizzying conditions. Like a spinning ballerina, we need our own ways of practicing spotting. So what does this mean? What can we do to maintain our bearings? What can we do to keep steering our ship? How do we keep ourselves focused and organized and motivated? To some extent, I'm sure the answers will vary for each of us. Participating in various routines and rituals that help us stay connected to ourselves, that help us return to a central focal point from which we can access our power. For me, the custom of studying Torah in the morning is one of the things that grounds me the most throughout my days. And it helps me check in with myself, assess where I'm at. It helps me remember how my brain works and how to stay connected to a tradition, to texts, and to people I care about. But that's one kind of grounding practice, but it's very internally focused. And our grounding practices can't just be internally focused. They can't just be about what makes us as individuals find comfort. Otherwise, we risk being like Jonah and actually turning inwards and becoming essentially asleep. When a ballerina uses spotting, by contrast, they use this technique that gives them balance and orientation, involves looking outward, not inward. They pick a spot outside of themselves to focus on. Similarly, a common technique for dealing with seasickness is looking out at the horizon. We too need spots to focus on that are outside of ourselves. The actions that we can take that do not just ground us internally, but through which we stay connected to the larger world. I would suggest that some of this is civic engagement, voting, registering others to vote, learning about local candidates, teaching about local candidates. Some of this is justice work, supporting local and national movements to fight climate change, racism, anti-Semitism, LGBTQ discrimination. And some of this is chesed work, calling older individuals who are particularly isolated, people who are sick, offering to pick up groceries for people who need help. And when I talk about this stuff at Chevrei Tzedek, I sort of know that I'm preaching to the choir on these issues. I know how strong this community is in terms of its involvement in caring for one another, for our community, and for the world more greatly. But when we're disoriented, it's easy to let go of our most basic practices. When we see government officials undermining democracy, it can cause us to lose faith and motivation. When we see how far behind we still are regarding issues of racism that we thought maybe we were past, we can start to feel powerless. And when we personally feel ourselves to be in a lot of pain, we can find it difficult to care for others. So I want to ask you an honest question. Are there routines that you've let go of in the past 6 months that you might want to pick up again? Or are there new routines, new ways of engaging in the world that will help you stay connected and oriented through these stormy times? Today is Yom Kippur, a day for tshuva, a day for turning, and a day for returning. We engage in cheshbon hanefesh, the examining of our souls. And in doing so this year, I want to encourage us not to just look inwards, but also to look outwards, looking at our context. The thing about spotting is that it doesn't require that you pick something big outside to focus on. It just has to be something outside, something that grounds you, that gives you the sense of orientation to keep going. This will be a different size and a different shape this year rather than another year, and that's okay. I believe that accepting that reality and persisting with it, that's how we act with true hope. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs teaches, optimism is the belief that things are going to get better. Hope is the belief that we can make things better. Optimism is a passive virtue. Hope is an active one. It takes no courage, he says, to be an optimist, but one does need courage to hope. No Jew, he continues, knowing what we do of the past, of hatred, bloodshed, persecution, can be an optimist, but Jews have never given up hope. This is a hard time to have hope. There have been other times that has also been hard to have hope. It is hard to have hope because we're in the midst of a raging storm. And we know that this is not the only storm we've passed through. The storm from Yonah might not provide us with a lot of guidance, but we can find guidance from a different biblical storm, the Great Flood. And that storm actually has its own Yonah, Yonah being the Hebrew word for dove. Doves are known for possessing a special sense known as magnetoreception. Magnetoreception is a sense which enables an organism to detect a magnetic field, which they use for orientation and for finding their way home. The first bird that Noah sends out after the storm is not the dove, does not have magnetoreception, it's the raven. When the raven goes out, we read, Vayetze yatso vashov. He goes back and forth. The raven, it seems, never lands, never quite comes back to the ark either, never settles anywhere. Leaves, is totally disoriented, just doesn't know what to do with itself, just goes back and forth in the sky. But when Noah sends out the dove after the storm to find dry land, at first the dove looks, doesn't find anything, and returns. The second time it goes out, finds an olive branch, perhaps hasn't found enough branches yet to make a nest and to really settle on land. But the third time it goes out, it goes and it never comes back. The dove, it seems, is saved from the fate of the raven, of wandering aimlessly. It maintains its orientation, and that enables it to go out and keep searching until it finds a place to make home after the storm. So this year, I pray for us. May we, like the dove, like the Yonah, be blessed with spiritual magnetoreception, keeping ourselves oriented and active through a time of terrible suffering. May we, like spinning ballerinas, find our spotting to focus on so that we can maintain our internal balance. May we, like a sea captain, turn our eyes to the horizon when we start to feel nauseous from the turbulence. And may this be a year of not optimism, but of acts of true hope. Gemar Chatima Tova. May we be sealed for a good year ahead.
We continue with Aleinu, page 246. Aleinu l'shabeach ladon hakol, l'tehet gedula liyotzer breshit, shelo asanu kigo yeho aratzot, v'lo samanu kimishbechato adama, shelo sam chelkeinu kahem, v'gor aleinu kechol hamonam. Vanachnu karim umishtachavim umahodim lifnei melech malachei hamlachim hakadosh baruch hu shevet hashemayim v'yitzrei samashem. Kakatu b'teratecha Adonai yimloch li'olam va'ed v'ne'emar v'haya Adonai le'melech al kol haaretz v'yomahu yeh Adonai echad u'shemo echad. Mourner's Kaddish is on page 247. Mourners and those observing yahrzeit. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei rabbah.
Amen.
V'alma divra kirutei v'amlich malchutei. V'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael. Ba'agala uvizman kariv v'yimru amen.
Amen.
Yehi
Yehei
shmei
Shmei
Rabbah
Rabba
mevarach
Mevarach
le'olam
Le'olam
u'olmei
U'olmei
almaya.
Almaya.
Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpoar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei dekudsha brichu.
Brichu.
La'ela mikol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran be'alma v'yimru amen.
Amen.
Yehei shlama rabba min shmaya v'chayim aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'yimru amen.
Amen.
Oseh shalom b'mromav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'yal kol yoshvei tevel v'yimru amen.
Amen.
248. The David Adonai O Rabbi Yeshim Mimi Ira Adonai Ma'oz Chaya Mimi Echad Bikro Olam Yirei Lechol. Lulei Hamanti Lerot B'tov Adonai B'Eretz Chayim Kavei El Adonai Chazak V'Ametz Libecha V'Kavei El Adonai. Mourner's Kaddish is repeated on 247. 247. Yitgadal V'Yitgadash Shemei Rabbah
Amen.
V'Alma Divra Kirutei V'Amlich Malchutei V'Chayechon V'Yomechon V'Chayei D'Chol Beit Yisrael Ba'agala uvizman kariv yemru amen.
Amen.
Yehei
Yehei
shmei
Shmei
Rabbah
Rabba
mevarach
Mevarach
v'olam
Le'olam
u'olmei
U'olmei
almaya.
Almaya.
Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpoar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei dekudsha brichu.
Brichu.
La'ela mikol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran b'alma v'yemru amen.
Amen.
Yehei shlama rabba min shmaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yemru amen.
Amen.
Oseh shalom b'mromav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'al kol yoshvei tevel V'yamru amen.
Amen.
We conclude with 249, Adon Olam. Adon Olam, Asher Malach, B'terem Kol Yitzir Nivra, Adon Olam, Le'et Nasa, V'cheptza Kol, Azai Melech Shemo Nikra, Adon Olam, V'yacharei Kichlot HaKol, Levado Yimloch Nara, Adon Olam, V'hu Haya, V'hu Hoveh, V'hu Yiyeh B'tifara, Adon Olam, V'hu echad v'yein sheni, leham shelo leachbira adon olam, beli reshit, beli tachlit, v'lo ha'oz v'ham yisra adon olam, v'hu eli, v'chai goali, v'tzur chavli b'eitzara adon olam, v'hu nisi umanos li, minat kasi b'yom ekra adon olam, Biado afkid ruchi, V'yetishan v'yayira adon olam, V'yim ruchi geviati, Adonai li v'lo ira adon olam. Rabbi Katz has a final word for us.
I just want to say Gemar Chatima Tova, and we'll see you tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Yizkor is approximately 11:15, and Musaf is precisely at 12 p.m.